Black Doctors Podcast, Season 6.
Test. Hello, welcome back to the Black Doctors Podcast. I am Steven, your host. We're going to kick off something a little different this episode, probably once a month or so. We're going to dig into the archives. We're going to bring back an episode from a while ago. The show's been around for, going on 3 years now. So we have a ton of episodes, ton of content, all super inspirational, really, really good, that you may not have heard before. And if you have heard before, it's probably been a while. So I'm going to remix a couple of the episodes that, really hit home, that were super motivational, inspirational to the listeners. We're going to kick it off with Dr. Michael Knight. He was featured on the podcast back in, I think, season 3 or season 4. Thing about the seasons, I kind of made those up as I went along. There's no true rhyme or reason to the seasons. Initially, I would just record like 12 episodes or so and then take a break and call that like a season 1 or 2 or whatever. And since probably season 3 or 4, maybe, I started putting out a podcast episode every week. And so it was kind of nonstop. And then when I got tired, I would change up the album art, maybe record some new music and make that the next season. Gotten a little better at making music, so it doesn't take me quite as long to make new theme songs. So that part, that's changed up. But right now, what has seemed to work is to change up the season every 6 months or so. So we're going to be heading towards the end of season 6, and we'll kick off season 7 in the new year. Probably more information that you want to know, but this is what it looks like behind the scenes of podcasting from somebody that's been podcasting for a couple of years now. So again, without further ado, we're going to first hear from our sponsor, Picmonic, and then we're going to jump into this episode featuring Dr. Michael Knight and learn about his career as an internal medicine physician centered on patient safety and the work that he's done with the Student National Medical Association and the National Medical Association.
This podcast is sponsored by Picmonic. In 2011, 2 medical students came up with the ingenious idea to combine medical education with unforgettable characters and ridiculously memorable stories. Featuring over 35,000 high-yield facts and graphics, Picmonic has helped over 600,000 students improve exam scores and perform better clinically. Picmonic has resources for pre-med and medical students, as well as other healthcare professions. Check out the show notes for a link to their website. Mention the podcast when you subscribe. With Picmonic, you can study less, but remember more. Hello and welcome back to the Black Doctors Podcast. This week, I am so excited to be speaking with Dr. Michael Knight. He's quite the impressive individual and physician. He currently practices in Washington, D.C. He is an internal medicine physician with specialized training in obesity medicine. He's here to talk about his amazing career thus far. Dr. Knight, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so I was looking over your resume and the list of impressive institutions you've trained and studied at. I figured we start at the beginning. Talk about Oakwood University and the role that played in setting you up for your career.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Oakwood University is near and dear to my heart and really had a foundational role in my career development. So I'm originally from New York City, grew up in the Bronx and Lower Westchester County, and went to high school, had a developing interest in science. I initially wanted to be a scientist, but my decision shifted after spending some time volunteering at a nursing home and interacting with patients. Really developed a desire to impact the lives of individuals with regard to their health. And so I was looking for a program to do pre-medical studies, and it took me down to Oakwood University. Now, Oakwood University is a historically Black college and university, so HBCU. And really provided a very, very enriching and welcoming experience. As a student who was interested in science, but didn't necessarily come from a high school that had all of the best resources. It really prepared me for the real world, and not in a place that I felt that I was being weeded out or that I was a part of a rat race, if you will. It was an opportunity to think about what are my goals, what are my challenges, what are my opportunities, and having faculty and staff that would invest in me as a person, almost like family. And I think that foundation was just so critical in my development and in my future when I went on to medical school.
What was your undergrad degree in?
Yeah, my undergraduate degree was in biomedical sciences. And I also had a minor in music. So I actually was involved in a vocal performance. I took vocal lessons. I performed in our concert choir and traveled around the United States and even internationally, which was a great addition, right? We always want to think about what other interests we have, even outside of medicine. Mm-hmm. And so after completing that course of study, I went on to medical school.
Nice. And where'd you go for medical school?
Sure. I was in Cleveland, Ohio at the Cleveland Clinic Lerner College of Medicine of Case Western Reserve University. And that is a 5-year program with 1 year of required research that either happens between the second and third year or between the third and fourth year. And so one of the reasons why I was recruited to go there was because of my interest in scientific research. As an undergraduate at Oakwood University, during my summers, I spent time at the Mayo Clinic doing pancreatic cancer research. And that really developed an interest in me to do translational or clinical research. And I wanted to go to a medical school that was going to foster that. So while I didn't decide to go into an MD PhD program, I did still want an opportunity to develop my research career and research knowledge base. And the Cleveland Clinic Lerner College of Medicine provided that for me.
Are all their students doing 5-year programs, or was that special?
No, all of the students. So it is a subset of the Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine, if you will. And so a small class size, they accepted about 32 of us every year. And we all did that extra year of research. So I actually did my extra year between my third and fourth year. And I came down to the DC area at the National Institutes of Health, where I did research on obesity and insulin resistance in African-American women.
That's very impressive, very incredible. I honestly didn't know that the program existed. So I'm sure our listeners, happy to find out these different options in pursuing a medical education.
Definitely. And I will also add that all of the students are on full tuition scholarships. So that's another reason to keep the Cleveland Clinic in mind as you're looking for options for medical school.
Yes, that is a very key, very important. Obviously, if you're interested in research like you are, that is a very nice program, it sounds like. So coming out of Cleveland Clinic, you went on so you're from New York, you went back to New York for your residency program in internal medicine. How was your time at New York Presbyterian?
Yeah, so I remember match day. I ranked Weill Cornell Medical Center number 1 for internal medicine. And I remember my parents flew out to Cleveland for match day, and I was so excited to be going home to New York City because, I really felt that my community in New York invested so much in me. When I look back to individuals who I grew up with, who I went to school with, who were not able to achieve their ultimate goals, having the ability to go on to medical school and become a medical doctor was really exceptional coming out of my community. And so I thought, why not have an opportunity to go back to your city and train and also become involved in the community, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So I matched and I moved back to New York City on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. And I spent 3 years training in internal medicine with a focus on obesity medicine. I started to develop an interest in obesity medicine as a medical student, not only with my research, but also with some elective time. And so when I went to Cornell, I realized that they had a very large medical weight management program, which I was able to work with in addition to training and learning the tenets of internal medicine.
So back in medical school, when you chose what specialty you would be applying into, what did you envision your future career looking like?
Yeah, so it's so interesting. When I first got to medical school, I had an interest in transplant surgery. So I even, published papers, first author papers as a medical student in a transplant journal. I was ready to go into transplant surgery. But until, as many of you know, you really don't know what it's like to be in a specialty until you're actually doing it.
Right.
And so during my third year is when I was able to really see that medicine really fit more with my personal goals and the way that I wanted to practice medicine and the way I wanted to be involved in patients' care. And so that's when I shifted to internal medicine. Also, when I realized that I wanted to do more than just clinical medicine, I started to develop interest in organizational leadership. As a medical student, I was heavily involved in the Student National Medical Association, which I'm sure we'll talk about. So I started to develop that leadership bug. And I said, internal medicine is such a adaptable and flexible specialty that will allow for you to have interest in other components of your career outside of clinical medicine in a pretty manageable way. And so that was also part of my decision process.
Yeah, I love that. I love because the way you start isn't the way you finish, and you learn so many things along the way, and you're able to pivot if you're susceptible to that, or if you're open to these other opportunities, which you obviously were, in your career has just gone down a completely different trajectory than you initially imagined.
Exactly.
So you came out of residency. I know we're rushing through because your CV is about the length of my arm. And I want to make sure we get every little step of the way. You came out of residency in New York. Where did you go from there?
Yeah, so during residency, not only am I developing my clinical interest, but also my leadership interest. So I started to think about quality and safety. So, New York Presbyterian, it's a phenomenal institution, but, different institutions operate different ways. And so coming from the Cleveland Clinic, which is one of the top 3 or 4 hospitals consistently in the United States, I saw that things were done a little bit differently. And I wondered as an intern, why do things work this way here? Why are things maybe not as efficient or timely as I've seen in other institutions? And as someone with a scientific background, I know that if I have a scientific question, there's a scientific method with a hypothesis and statistics in a way that we, test a question to come up to a solution. But in medicine, I wasn't seeing that. I was seeing a lot of brainstorming. I was seeing a lot of, this is an initiative we're going to do. And as an intern, you often wonder, is anyone at the table making these decisions that actually sees patients?
Right.
Because a lot of times it just wasn't connecting. And that's when I was introduced to the science of quality improvement and fell in love with a standardized way of addressing clinical process problems. And I started working on transitions of care, started working on root cause analyses around patient safety events. And so when I started to develop that interest, I said, I want to do additional training in quality and safety, but also in leadership, because I knew that I wanted to do more outside of the clinical setting in an administrative role. And so that took me to the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, where I joined the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation Clinical Scholars Program, which is a 2-year program. In the past, it's now transitioned to the National Clinician Scholars Program. And that allowed me to spend 2 years focusing on quality and safety. I was able to do a visiting fellowship at the Joint Commission. I was able to work with our patient safety team at the University of Pennsylvania. And I got a Master's of Science in Health Policy Research. So it was a great experience there in Philadelphia, and it really set me up for the administrative roles that I have today.
Wow. Yeah, that is amazing. And so how does that program work? Because Robert Wood Johnson University is associated with Rutgers, if I'm not mistaken.
So this is through the foundation. So the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation is, one of the largest health foundations in the country and even in the world. And they sponsor a number of programs. And so for many, many years, they sponsored this development program for physicians, early career physicians at a variety of locations. So UCLA, for example, University of Michigan, Yale University, and others in the past have had them. And so it's a 2-year program that's extremely competitive, but individuals have gone on to become, health department leads, directors of Center for Medicare Services, department chairs, healthcare executives, a variety of ways. So it's not just teaching you health policy, but it's really a leadership development program. And you really focus on the area that is of interest to you.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Thank you for clarifying. And so for that 2 years, can you kind of describe the pay and the workload? Was it similar to a fellowship or residency or being attending?
Yes, I think the pay was probably similar to a fellow. It's a non-clinical fellowship, so they're not teaching you how to take care of patients. Clinically, you are operating as an attending. But most of us are doing about 0.1 or 0.2 clinical time. So what does that mean? For me, it was a half day a week of clinic. and I was working at the VA in Philadelphia as an attending. And then outside of that time, I was doing research. I was doing classes. I was learning statistics, study design, health policy, the way that you interact with community organizations to do participatory research, getting my master's, as well as doing research projects and developing interests. And so it was a very, very flexible program. You know, that first year we had more classwork, if you will. And the second year, you spend a lot more time independently developing your project as well as interests.
And then where did the other folks in the program come from? You came out of residency.
Yes.
Were there attendings? Were there medical students, or what was their makeup?
So everybody was out of residency. So it's really a program for individuals who have just finished residency or just finished fellowship, or maybe even will be in fellowship. And so that's where my other cohort was from. And they're all phenomenal. They've gone on to do such amazing things, either at institutions and health departments. I'm extremely proud of them. But like I said, it's an opportunity to spend 2 years to get the foundational training and knowledge, but then to take that and translate it into a career that you can work in to transform the way we deliver care. That's the biggest thing. They want to invest this time and energy into you, but they want to see you flourish in making an impact in our industry.
Definitely, we'll include the link to this program. We can read more about it in the show notes. And Dr. Knight, so coming out of this program, as we continue down your story, where did you go from University of Pennsylvania?
Yeah, so after Penn, I said, I'm ready to get a job. So I'm an early career physician. I'm 2 years out of residency. I've been a non-clinical fellowship, and I'm looking for an administrative job with a clinical component. So want to be in academic medicine, want to have a faculty appointment, want to have a clinical practice, but I also wanted to have a impactful role in quality and safety leadership. And I would say that for someone my age at that time, that was a little different, because most of my mentors in the space were individuals who had practiced for many, many years and then developed an interest in quality and safety a little bit later on. And so it was more of a mid-career move. And so most individuals that I saw in the positions I was interested were individuals who had been practicing for a long time. So I'm coming in, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, a young gentleman who says, yeah, I'm ready to take on this leadership role. So I was a little bit hesitant, didn't know what to expect. But the reality was that the training and preparation that I was able to get at University of Pennsylvania, at Cornell, and at my short time at the Joint Commission as a visiting fellow really set me up to be a competitive candidate. And so I was able to interview at a number of institutions and received a number of job offers to join their team in quality and safety. I ultimately decided to come to GW, the George Washington University in Washington, D.C., because they gave me the largest opportunity to be impactful in the space of quality and safety. I felt that I'd had a lot of training, a lot of theoretical work, but I was ready to get to work. I was ready to be able to have the time that was set aside for me to be able to develop patient safety programs and initiatives and really have a seat at the table. And, GW took a chance on me, as someone early coming out of fellowship. And I took a chance with them to say, I'll come in, but are you ready to change? Because at that time, they did not have a large patient safety program in their ambulatory practices. And so I joined as the patient safety officer for the Division of General Internal Medicine, and within 3 months became the patient safety officer for the Medical Faculty Associates, which is the physician group that encompasses all of our ambulatory network in DC, Maryland, and Virginia.
Wow, that is impressive. And so can you tell us now, what is a typical day like for you?
Yeah, so I've been here at GW now for 4 years. I had been serving as the patient safety officer for that time, and about a month ago, I transitioned to a new role. I'm now the Associate Chief Quality and Population Health Officer and the Head of Healthcare Delivery Transformation. So it's a huge role. It encompasses not only patient safety, which I've been doing, but also healthcare quality. So thinking about the way that we improve care for patients, as well as our primary care service line, leading primary care expansion for our organization. And so my day-to-day involves lots of meetings, lots of strategy, lots of interactions with senior leadership, but also time to see patients. I'm in clinic now about twice a week.
Okay.
Not only in primary care clinic, but also in obesity medicine clinic. And so I take care of patients who need general health. And I also have a specific clinic that takes care of patients who are looking to manage their weight or to achieve a healthy weight for them. And so when I'm not doing that, another hat that I have is in the education space. And so as this is an academic institution, I started to become more involved in undergraduate medical education.
Okay.
And I'm now serving as course director for the Patient Populations and Systems course, which is a required course for all of our medical students. So I have about 170 plus students every year that take my course in the spring, and they learn about health equity, health disparities, evidence-based medicine, quality, safety, and healthcare technology.
That is, you've said the word before, impactful. That is the definition of having an impact.
Thank you. And, ultimately, that's what I wanted to do. If 10 years ago, 5 years ago, if you asked me what my career would be like, I would answer this. I think this is a lot more multifaceted than I envisioned. But ultimately, the reason that I do this every day is because I enjoy it. I'm passionate about it. I'm passionate about education, about operations, about administration, about patient care. But ultimately, it's to provide equitable care to our community. And that's the common thread throughout all of my roles here professionally at GW.
To that end, let's take it back. You talked about making an impact and serving the community. Back in medical school, or when was the first time that you really got involved with the Student National Medical Association?
So the Student National Medical Association.
Let's take a break to hear from our sponsor, TrueLearn.
Hey there, I hope you're enjoying listening to the show. I wanted to take a minute to talk about TrueLearn and thank them for sponsoring the Black Doctors Podcast. TrueLearn is a medical exam preparation company that helps you outperform on your boards. If you are a medical student or resident physician, you should definitely check out their products. If you sign up, please use the code BDPodcast and you'll get a discount. They have resources for both DO students as well as MD students and even physician assistants. When it comes to residency licensure, they offer question banks for over 8 different specialties. TrueLearn gives analytics that give you insight into your study habits, your question responses, and tracks you along with your peers. Students and residents average 20% improvements after completing a TrueLearn Smart Bank. Check them out at truelearn.com. And again, remember to use the code BDPodcast to receive your special discount. Now back to the show.
Let's take it back. You talked about making an impact and serving the community. Back in medical school, or when was the first time that you really got involved with the Student National Medical Association?
So the Student National Medical Association was really the home of my leadership experiences in organizations. I had not known about the organization before joining as a first-year medical student. Coming from a historically Black college and university, one of the first things I did as my first, experience being in the minority, if you will, in a medical school, was look at the student organizations. And I said, where can I find a community? Where can I find an organization that focuses on the needs of my community? And that's where I saw Student National Medical Association. So I remember going to my first chapter meeting to learn about what was being done in Cleveland and at our school. And I immediately became involved. I was a community service co-chair. I went on to become the chapter president during my second year. And then I started becoming involved at the national level. I became the regional chair and then went on to become the national president in my fourth year of medical school. And that was just a transformational experience for me to be able to develop programs, impactful programs for chapters around the country of over 6,000 medical students.
Wow. That
would impact the lives of thousands of people that they interacted with. So during my presidency, focused on HIV/AIDS prevention, on mentorship with the Boys and Girls Club, also on developing leadership development for our students, and had an opportunity to present to Congress, to speak at numerous events across the country during that year, and as a medical student. And it was just so transformational in turning me into someone who, I don't know if it's turning me, but really bringing out the charismatic, person that I guess I am, but I definitely did not feel that way before I went to medical school. I was definitely afraid of public speaking. Just did not see myself like that. And through the SNMA, I was able to develop into a true leader. And that has carried on since that time.
Wow. And as you're well aware, there's plenty of eyes that are watching you and have watched your career progress. Some of those eyes are my own, because I remember seeing you at one of the SNMA conferences up on stage, and the way you carried yourself, the way you spoke. There's obviously something different about you. There is those leadership qualities just shining through. So thank you for the impact that you had on my career, as well as thousands of other people.
No, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I can't speak enough about SNMA. We're privileged to have Dr. Obo, the most recent past president of SNMA, on a previous episode of the show. So love the organization and love everything it stands for. So Dr. Knight, coming out of the SNMA, there's because that's associated with a larger organization, the National Medical Association, which you're also active in this organization. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. So I completed the Student National Medical Association. It's a student organization. So once I graduated from medical school, I went on to residency and said, okay, where am I going to become involved? And I immediately became involved in the National Medical Association. I became the vice chair of the postgraduate section, which is a section for residents, fellows, and early career physicians, and went on to become the postgraduate section chair and trustee. I joined the board of trustees of this organization that represents over 30,000 African-American physicians and has been around for 126 years. The National Medical Association was formed at a time when African-Americans could not join other medical organizations. And we needed a place that we could learn from each other, but also come together to advocate for the health of our community. And since that time, the National Medical Association has existed for doing just that. And so I have continued in NMA leadership from a resident leader to going on to being a regional chair when I was just finishing fellowship and coming to GW. And I'm now a trustee for our region, Region 2, which is the mid-Atlantic part of the country, serving on the board of trustees in leadership. And I've been involved in leading our committees around social media and branding, membership, convention, and now also serving as a subsection chair for general internal medicine for our internal medicine section of the NMA.
And what does the NMA offer for young career physicians as well as mid-career physicians? Why should they join?
So that's such a great question, and it's one that I get a lot, because the reality is, as physicians, we're pulled in many different directions. Not only do we have responsibilities at our home institutions, a variety of committees, many of us are pulled into diversity committees, educational committees, but then you have your professional society. So as an internist, I have the American College of Physicians, I have the Society of General Internal Medicine, I have the Obesity Medicine Association, and there are many, many more depending on your specialty. So then now we have an opportunity to join those, right? So in the past, 100 years ago, we couldn't, but now we can. So now we can be involved. Why should we still be involved in an organization like the National Medical Association? And I would say that of all the organizations that I'm involved in, which are many, and have leadership, do have a leadership position in the American Medical Association as well, where I serve as the chair of our Minority Affairs section, the NMA still continues to be my home. I consider it my professional home organization. I feel completely at home when I go to the National Medical Association because I am surrounded by individuals with similar backgrounds, with similar focus on equity and on pursuing physician sustainability as well as optimal health for the African American community. And I have not found that in any other organization to the level that I have found it in the NMA. It's not just about learning about the next breakthrough in a treatment process in internal medicine. I can find that at the NMA, but I can also find colleagues who are from similar backgrounds, who have similar interests in my specialty. Every specialty is represented in the NMA. It's just phenomenal. I mean, I remember I went somewhere and I was describing it as like Wakanda for a Black physician. It is literally like that. I mean, you go to our annual convention. It's virtual this year, but when we're in person, I recommend all physicians, medical students, residents, fellows, if you can get to an NMA convention, it's always held in the summer. Get there and it'll be a life-changing experience, because walking into a convention center with 3,000 or 4,000 African-American physicians from all over the country talking about issues that affect us and affect our patients is exceptional, invaluable, and you won't find it anywhere else.
Done. All right. I'm going to sign up after we get off this phone call.
I'm going to hold you to it. And you will not be disappointed.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Knight, it's been incredible speaking with you and seeing how your career has progressed. And it's only natural that you stepped off into doing more work with the media and really being the face of different organizations and policies. Can you talk about that aspect of your career?
Yes. So, when you talk about being the face of the organizations, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about my nonprofit organization, the Renewing Health Foundation, that I actually founded as an intern.
Wow.
When I came off of being in SNMA, I had a year riding high, a year as a national president of a large organization, doing programming, doing intervention. And now I was a resident. I said, well, how am I going to take all of the tools and the skills that I've gained to really impact the lives of individuals, particularly in my own city? And as I said before, one of the biggest things for coming back to New York was being able to invest in the community that invested in me. Mm-hmm. And so I founded the Renewing Health Foundation as a 501c3 nonprofit organization, took care of all that paperwork, between call nights, and developed an organization that works to empower urban minority communities to live their best lives through health education. And that's exactly what we've done since 2012. Wow. And we have continued to build programming around minority health. Our largest program right now is our breast cancer education program that has raised over $40,000 to develop health education programs for African American and Latino women in the New York City metropolitan area to learn about breast health, breast cancer prevention and treatment, and have also launched a survivor network that is faith-based and allows survivors to build community and support each other. And so that is a huge, huge, huge part of what I'm able to be involved in. And then outside of that, when you talk about media work, I would say in the last 12 months, my media presence has increased exponentially. And ultimately it was around COVID-19. As an outpatient physician and someone who's involved in administration, I wasn't the person who was in the ICU intubating patients who were suffering from COVID-19. And seeing the impact that it was having in my community, I said, how could I be involved? If I can't be on the front line in the hospital, how else can I help? And I immediately started to see the misinformation that was going around COVID-19.
Yeah.
That got to stand out in the sun, that just gargle with lemon water, the Black people can't get COVID, all kind of things I was hearing on social media. And I said, you know what? We need individuals who are able to get in front of the camera and talk to our community, individuals that our community can see and can trust, trusted voices. And, sometimes it sounds very superficial, but the reality is individuals want to see people that look like them on television talking about important issues. And so when I started to get opportunities to do that, I jumped to it. So since that time, I've done over 60 media appearances on all of the local major networks here in DC, ABC Network, CBS, you name it, NBC, Fox, local, as well as some national news outlets and print media such as the Washington Post, Newsweek, and you name it. I've done in different interviews, not just to be there, but really to get the factual information out there. And that has been so transformational. I remember when I got the vaccine, the COVID-19 vaccine in December, I decided to document my experience on social media. And that picked up. I had a lot of patients who said, Dr. Knight, I saw you get the vaccine and I saw what you went through. And that helped me to make the decision for myself.
Good,
and it was picked up by our local station that they did a whole presentation on my story and my involvement on social media. And it was important. It was so important for individuals to see what my experience was when we're dealing with something new that they had questions about. And so I look forward to continuing that media presence so that we can get factual information to individuals from trusted voices and to help them. I recently did a campaign with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services for their Trusted Voices campaign around COVID-19 vaccine concerns and use in the minority communities. And that's what we focused on, not focusing on what we call hesitancy, but focusing on answering people's questions so that they can feel comfortable making a personal decision about their health.
That's so incredible, so impactful, and you're actually definitely helping so many people. But Dr. Knight, I wonder, as an incredibly busy physician with multiple roles and multiple hats, how do you coordinate scheduling these different media appearances?
So I'm thankful to have a wonderful media team here at GW that I work very closely with. And so, they'll email me, they'll text me, they'll call me if I don't respond. Say, Dr. Knight, we have a media request. I actually just did one before this interview to answer a question. And sometimes these questions are so simple to us as physicians, but these are things that people need. And so I'll jump on to do a quick interview. If it's something that's on video, I usually walk around with my camera, maybe a lighting, so that I'm always ready to go. When I travel, I always pack something so that if I need to do a quick interview in a hotel room, I can also do that. So it's some flexibility, but I enjoy doing it.
Good. Yeah, it's good to hear the behind the scenes, how you make things work.
Definitely.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Knight, enjoyed hearing about this Renewing Health Foundation. I wanted to circle back around to that. So almost 10 years that the organization has been in existence. When you started, you said you were an intern?
Yes, intern in internal medicine.
Wow. And how did you manage that throughout residency, and when did it start to pick up? How did you manage the staffing constraints and all that?
Yeah, so, we depend on volunteers. And so initially it was just me going around and doing presentations at churches, at community organizations on minority health. But particularly when we developed our breast cancer education program, which was near and dear to my heart. When I was a resident, my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer, and thank God she was treated and is now cancer free. But it was an opportunity for us to develop something to address concerns and issues that I saw even with my own mother, who was an educated woman. There still were a lot of things that she didn't understand or that were barriers to her care. And so we developed this education program and immediately got volunteers who were joining our team, who wanted to be involved. And that's what we've done. I have turned over a lot of the work to this volunteer team. I'm still around for strategic direction. And of course, we have an annual fundraiser every year in the fall on Breast Cancer Awareness Month in October. That's what I'm heavily involved in. We were virtual last year, but we continue to raise funds for programming and doing a variety of work. So, the reason I usually tell people about the founding of the organization is because there's really never a huge, ultimate, unsurmountable barrier to your dream or your idea to have an impact in your community. Someone could have said, why don't you wait till you get done with training and wait till you're settled down before you start something like this? The reality is I've never been less busy, right? I've always been busy, and you're always going to be busy. If you're passionate about something, if you want to get something done, find a way. I went online. I said, how do you apply for a 501c3? And I followed the instructions and I did it.
Yeah.
Worked and got an investment from folks. And here we are today. Next year will be 10 years, which is going to be phenomenal. I didn't even think about that. 10 years of doing this work. And I'm so glad I did it.
Wow. Well, let me ask you this. How long was it only you working in this organization?
I would say at the beginning, it was me primarily, but I would say within our first year, I had volunteers who had come on board.
Wow.
So it allowed me to expand what we were doing. And particularly when I moved out of New York, it was critically important to have a team on the ground that could continue our work.
Thank you so much for sharing. And Dr. Knight, thank you for coming on the show. You've given us so much things to think about and to consider. I think for people sitting back, they look at folks that are incredibly successful, have an incredible impact, such as yourself, you can kind of be overwhelmed. You know, maybe you're a medical student or a resident that wants to have an impact, but they, your head can spin if you think about too many things at the same time. What would you say to those folks that are in the beginning of their careers or beginning of their education that want to have an impact, such like yourself?
I would say, don't limit yourself based on other people's perceptions or expectations. And I know this is so cliche, but, people say where there's a will, there's a way. It's actually real. Every time that I've done something, there's been at least one person that told me I could not do it. When I applied for the Robert Johnson Foundation Clinical Scholars Program, I remember being told by an advisor that, I shouldn't necessarily waste my time applying because they're looking for people with experience and not potential. And I remember coming home and telling my mother that on the phone, and she said, "Oh no, now you're definitely applying for that program." And here we are today. And so that's always going to be it. Yes, people may have their own perception based on their own experience, and maybe they were not successful with what you're trying to do, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to be successful. I also encourage people to seek out individuals who have done what you want to do. And sometimes that doesn't mean that person needs to be your mentor, right? Mentorship is very much a two-way street and really requires a lot of investment. But maybe you don't need a mentor. Maybe you just need to have a meeting with them. Maybe you can just talk to them on the phone for 20 minutes and pick their brain and find out how they did something. Or maybe you're just going to go to their LinkedIn profile and see what they actually did to get where they are, which I have done many times. And it actually has led me to many of the things that have happened in my career. I looked and said, who is in a job that I want to be in 10 years? And let me understand how they got there. I may not follow the same path, but maybe I'm going to learn something from what they did. And I start putting together different paths, putting together different strategies, and I get it done. If you're committed, you can do it. Don't let people deter you from something that you feel passionate about, because guess what? The worst thing is to be 10 years down the line and hate what you're doing. We have to remember why we went into this specialty, why we went into this field, and make sure that the decisions you're making, yes, some things we have to do just to pay the bills. I understand that. But when you have an opportunity to do something that you're passionate about, that helps you go at home and feel like you've done something, that at 3 a.m., if you're still up working on it, you don't feel like you've worked all day, you actually feel excited about it, let that be a part of what you do every day. And I think you will find that life and your life's work is extremely rewarding, and you will feel like you will continue to have an impact in not only the lives of others, but in your own life, and feel that you have succeeded in fulfilling your ultimate goal.
That was the word. Oh, Dr. Knight, thank you so much for joining us. You mentioned the LinkedIn profiles. If people want to find out more about you, see the things that you've done, and continue to watch your progress and success, how can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm on social media, so you can find me on Twitter, also on LinkedIn at MGKnightMD. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook at The District Doc, so THE District, as in District of Columbia, and then Doc, DOC, and that's where you can find me. So you'll find some of my media work, you'll find some of what I do day to day, and you'll also be able to see some components of my career that we didn't get to, but those are other things that I'm excited about as well.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Knight, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show, and I know our listeners are going to be excited to hear everything that you've shared in this episode.
No, thank you. And I hope that people will be inspired to work towards their dreams and ultimately to impact the lives of others, and never miss an opportunity to do that.
Thanks for listening to the Black Doctors Podcast. We're here because representation matters. Tune in every Monday for a new episode.